Welcome to the Tech Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Vincent, and on this podcast, I interview people in tech. As always, this show is sponsored by the consulting launch method, where I help experienced tech professionals build their own consulting business without spending years figuring out the business side. We've helped clients go from first idea to first client in 90 days and six figures within a year. To learn more, connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message. On today's show, we have Andy Perry, and Andy is a fractional CTO, solution architect, freelancing at different places over the last several years. And his primary focus is around strategy and architecture. So, Andy, welcome to the show. Welcome, and I wanted to ask you the question I always love to start with, right? Looking back at your career, what's the decision or projects that you're most proud of, and what made it stand out for you?
Okay, brilliant. Well, yeah, thanks for having me on. So, there's probably been a couple I can think of. I think the main piece of work, I used to work for a company called Reckitt Benckiser, or RB as they're now known. And you've probably got lots of their products in your house, from Lemsip to Finish, Calgon, and so on. And I was probably mid-20s, getting on for 30, and Reckitt bought and acquired Boots Healthcare International, based in Nottingham. So anyone who's ever seen the Boots campus in Nottingham, it's almost like its own village. So this particular section of Boots Healthcare, and they gave me the project of integrating all of the end-use compute infrastructure. And I've done some Active Directory projects and some kind of office upgrades and stuff, but this was absolutely huge. So for a year, me and other people who were doing the ERP integrations and the business application integrations spent a year in and out of Nottingham. Bearing in mind, I was living in Hull, which is where I'm from originally, at the time, working on this project. And between us, we did it. We achieved it against transitional service agreements. We merged everything. Yes, there was glitches. Yes, there was blood, sweat, and tears and everything, but absolutely kind of pivotal projects where you kind of go, yeah, you know what, I did that. I can do other things like this as well. And I think subsequently I've worked in other kind of merger acquisition, divestment style projects. And I always go back to some of the principles I learned from that project. So really kind of thrown in at the deep end, but came out swimming, fortunately.
So what principles are those?
Um, I think when I've ever done something like this, it almost sounds like obvious, but you just kind of go back, like, what have we got? Where are we coming from? And I always just start with an Excel spreadsheet, almost kind of go, what are we dealing with here? Let's like list out all of our clients, all of our servers, all of our applications, all of our kind of services, and then run them through a kind of kill, keep, migrate principle. Are we hanging on to this? Do we need to transform it? Can we get rid of it? How are we merging these things? And you just start with a really simple kind of model, and then eventually it explodes even further. And RB acquired another company a few years later. I adopted an almost identical principle. I've done it at subsequent places. So these aren't specialist models or anything like that. It is just kind of, to me, it's coming from common sense. If you know you've got to get somewhere, you've got to do a merger, you've got to know where you're coming from, you've got to know what obstacles you're going to have to kind of overcome, and just start kind of like documenting and come up with the plan of what the challenge is. And I think sometimes there's almost what I was seeing when I've done things like this, certainly a lot of senior stakeholders adopt a relatively kind of simplistic approach because they can't get into the weeds, which is, well, we've got 1,000 laptops we need to replace. We'll just come along, buy another 1,000 laptops, swap those 1,000 laptops out, and then we're done. I'm like, those 1,000 laptops you're replacing have got user profiles, they've got data, they've got applications, they've probably got peripherals. We've got to think a little bit more nuanced. And again, just coming from a technical background, but moving into, say, more kind of like strategic roles going forward, it's starting to be able to kind of like play across those two spaces and just bring that experience to the table. So yeah.
And how do you because obviously use a spreadsheet. I'm a spreadsheet person myself, right? So I like a spreadsheet, but so documenting where you are at the moment, but then where how do you kind of determine and how do you engage with your clients to figure out where they need to get to, or do you advise them on where they need to get to?
Yeah, I mean, with like I said, this M&A or this divestment approach, it would be you it would start off with something even as fundamental as, right, I have an email server, right? Okay, what am I doing? I'm going to collapse that email server into another email server, right? Who are the owners? What's the service? Who looks after this? But when you get into the business applications, it becomes a little bit more specialist. You might have an HR system. You might have, with the Boots example, there was manufacturing execution systems. There was pharmaceutical like dispensing systems, things that dispense Nurofen. It's ibuprofen. If you don't get that right, you're in a regulatory nightmare. So we kind of like document say, I have a system here. It dispenses a drug, right? Who owns this system? Who's responsible for the compliance? We can't just pick that up, drop it into a new environment, expect it all to work. We might need to transform it. We might need to upgrade its operating system. We might need to virtualize it. You might need to move it to the cloud. What's the impact of doing that, and how do we plot that journey? But before we know what that journey is, we've got to know that we have that system in place. So there's almost like this discovery activity. And I find across multiple places I've worked at, knowing what that baseline is sometimes something that's either not documented or not maintained. And obviously then you've got the shadow IT problem where people have gone out and bought their own things and so on, that you find out, at the 11th hour. So I think understanding where we're coming from and then plotting out what the plans are, who the owners are, then you can go and engage them and have that dialogue and go, right, what are we doing? And obviously from there, you can start to ascertain what the budget looks like and probably find that it's going to cost you 10 times more than what someone predicted it was going to cost to transform. So,
yeah, I understand. So do you like the technical side or the working with people side, or are how's that sort of evolved?
Yeah, a bit of both, really. I've done a friend of mine's does kind of coaching and kind of training and so on, and I went through the insights personality, and I came out as like a blue and a yellow conflicted, which is basically like an individual like to work in my own space, but equally I need to get energy from others, so it's a bit of a conflicted area. So sometimes I've got to work on the problem, solve it myself, then sit down, share it, work at it, then bring it back down, and then bounce it back and forward. So yeah, I need a bit of both, really, in my day-to-day life.
Okay, to keep you sane, I suppose.
That's right. Yeah.
But so if you were starting your tech career again tomorrow, knowing what you know now, and obviously there's in the last 10, 20 years, obviously lots of technical changes have happened. AI has come in, largely, very prominently now. All the transitions are happening. I mean, what is the one thing that you will do differently? That you would tell your younger self to do differently?
Yeah, I think the one thing is probably trust my instincts a bit more. I think I look at times over the year where I instinctually have known something's right or wrong, and that could be tech, it could be a future growth or a strategy, it could be even individuals, and I've had a feeling about it, and I think, and I look back over the years, I've never trusted that. I've maybe thought, yeah, maybe that's not going to work out right or something, or maybe this is the way we should be going. And when someone's told me that's not right, or I've just kind of gone, yeah, okay, fair enough, and just I kind of accepted it. And I think one of the things I've learned over the years is it's not that I'm always right, absolutely, definitely not. But it's more when you have a kind of gut feeling about something based on partly intuition, partly experience, is really kind of believe in yourself and kind of trust it. And it's not that you necessarily would have been able to change something, but you might have been able to influence something or maybe defended your position a little better. And instead of kind of looking back and going, oh, well, I knew that would happen, is actually trying to maybe be a bit more assertive or making a difference with it. So easier said than done, very easy in hindsight. But I think, yeah, certainly trusting your own judgment and believing in yourself a little bit more.
Yeah, fair. And do you have an example where you've ignored this and it sort of didn't pan out, or?
I think there's been, without getting into all the details, I think there's maybe been individuals that I've been involved in like kind of recruitment. I've been like, I'm not sure if this is working out, and I've been like, no, maybe it's me, maybe it needs a bit of time, and it's fundamentally, it's probably just been a bad fit, and it's kind of working on that again, a much earlier opportunity and believing it, or moving away from people and into tech, kind of seeing how growth of, I don't know, even things like the adoption of tablets when everyone started bringing iPads into the organization and so on. And a lot of people thought this is quite gimmicky. And to an extent it was at the time, but I was like, this is clearly the way people are going to want to start interacting. They don't want a machine that takes 10 minutes to boot up and is quite clunky. They want a thing that you just turn on, swipe, and you can get your responses. And again, I was kind of shot down a bit and kind of like, right, well, this is unlikely to, this again, it's a bit of a gimmick. People are probably playing kind of solitaire on them and everything, but now everyone's got a mobile device. People are working on tablets. And again, I'm not sure this would have changed the world, but I think, again, just being a bit more stronger and defending of my position about like rationalizing why would have been examples of that. And I think, again, throughout projects, you can sometimes see through experience something's going to go wrong here.
Yeah.
But certainly in a kind of consultative capacity, you can tell somebody you think this is going to go wrong. You can't necessarily sometimes even evidence it. You might be able to kind of go, look, there's these risks, these might get realized. But if fundamentally someone doesn't want to accept your warning or your guidance, or they might think you're kind of scaremongering a bit, they don't have to. But it's never good to kind of go, right, this has all gone wrong. What we're going to, and there's no point in saying I told you so. It's just a case of, right, that's all good. We made that decision. We move on. How do we fix it? How do we kind of like get to a better position? So yeah, there's lots of different examples. It's probably across the whole people, process, technology. But I think, yeah, just looking back, there's been times where I maybe should have just said, no, I maybe need to put my foot down a bit more on this one and kind of be a bit more assertive about it.
Fair enough. I sort of recognize it also. You sometimes a gut feeling, but I think it's sometimes challenging to get to figure out why your gut feeling is telling you something and rationalize it into an argument that you can convey. It's not always easy.
No, and it's fun. I was chatting with a friend, and he was talking to me about how you know, some of my experience and skills, how you might start sharing them, or whether it be through writing a book or running a session or anything like that. And I said, it's funny because I've thought about this, and I likened it to almost like playing a musical instrument or something. So there's almost like an abstract kind of like sense of intuition. I'm fairly intuitive about like tech. I always have been since literally as early as I can remember, like 2 or 3 years old. But I'm not particularly intuitive when it comes to like playing instruments. So like my wife, and I know people pick up a guitar and just or any instrument start playing it. I can pick up a piece of technology, and within minutes I've probably figured out how to use it or how to do something with it. That's probably quite a hard thing to teach. So again, over the years, you've kind of like learned, yeah, I just have a knack for being able to do something like this and then rely on that. But how you would teach that, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I'll figure it out one day.
Yeah, I think it's what is underrated sometimes is the experience you have, right? As a in that kind of field that builds over years and years and years. That when most people only see 20 years of experience at work, they haven't seen the 20 years beforehand that gained you that experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you the sort of final sort of question, but what does the next chapter of your career look like for you, right? Before we started talking, you already mentioned a few things, but tell me a bit more about that, Andy.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I mean, I've my last 10, 15 years kind of freelancing, very much in a solutions architecture, enterprise architecture type space. And I've done bits of project management and business analyst in between all of that. But I think one of the things I found myself kind of the role evolving into is having more strategic conversations about some of the technologies, and obviously with AI coming in, that's another thing. So my next kind of career trajectory start to move towards like a fractional CTO space. So I've got a couple of areas I'm like looking to move into there. Equally things like board advisory style roles where you can kind of move from the kind of doing to the advising. I think that's probably going to be a challenge, moving from this relatively like hands-on doing problem solving space to more this, right, how do we start laying out these directions and strategies? But I think that's absolutely something I'm I'm looking to move into. I've got generally a healthy cynicism when it comes to most technologies. So whether this has been virtualization to clouds or obviously now AI, but as I've started to kind of embrace some of the areas I'm seeing right where we have got some kind of gimmicky things to where we've actually got some really value added stuff. So I'm enrolled in a couple of training programs and doing some self-development about less around the things like the generative AI, where you can just say, write me a blog or draw me a picture of a cat or something, about how do we actually take something like an AI capability and actually embed it and solve the problem. And this is probably something and other people you've spoken to know, is these high technologies come in, it's like, I need AI, that's the answer. I don't necessarily know what the problem is. So I think part of the role I want to move into is let's start to understand, we've clearly got this amazing capability here, but let's try and map out what it is, where your main problems are, and then we can try and solve it. Not like, how do I embed AI in my organization? That's fine, but let's try and understand specifically what problems you're trying to address. So very much move into more that strategic business change style thinking, and coupling that with my tech background. That's the next steps for me, hopefully.
Fantastic. Yes. Yeah, I sort of resonate with it. I mean, you see a lot of a rush to AI, and as consequently, most AI deployments are, not living up to the expectations, up to the hype, right? As we know, the data in the meat is often very well, how shall we say it?
Limited, constrained.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not great quality. Let's call it that, right?
Yeah.
And I think I've seen it in lots of technology transitions, is that what ultimately the objective is to actually replicate what you have. When we went to cloud, right? We do a lot of moves, digital transformation and cloud transformation projects. You're kind of replicating what you had on-prem into the cloud, but if you had something messy on-prem and you can replicate it on cloud, it's still messy, right?
Yep.
And actually, it's more complicated because it's in the cloud. It's messy. Same with AI. So I feel that there's a huge opportunity to some extent for consultants and like people like yourself to actually kind of address that sort of chasm almost, right? Just like, well, as you are moving to AI or to cloud or whatever it is, let's sit down. Okay, what do you really need to achieve as your business? And figure out if what you have today, how it works today, is actually still the right way to work in the new world, right? And how can we leverage the new world in a better way so it actually has the impact that you're really looking for.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I mean, when we've done cloud migrations, or I spoke to companies about it, they kind of said, using your example exactly, I have a server, it's sat in a corner, I will virtualize it and I'll go and put it in the cloud, wipe my hands that it's now in the cloud. And like, actually, and this is an example, a real example, a company needed to migrate some stuff to the cloud. They took a server, and I said, that server is going to, if you migrate that like for like, it will start costing you something like £7,000 or £8,000 a month to run that in the cloud, because of the kind of particular, it was like a SQL Server Enterprise with about 48 cores or something like that. I said, so you might have moved it over there and you might think job done, but now you're going to get a big bill. And that was just one server. So, and I appreciate it's looking at the practicalities, because if you've got a transitional service agreement you need to exit, you can't spend a year trying to transform that thing because you've got to get off the TSA, but you need to understand there needs to be a trajectory of how you're going to transform it and move. And absolutely, it becomes more messy because you've got security implications or performance implications. And even the same with AI, and you seeing it, Microsoft are going in and giving everyone a Copilot license, but no one really knows how to use Copilot. And then you're finding that people are utilizing their own chat GPTs or Claudes or something, and your data is like leaking out of the organization because people aren't being told how to use these things, how to like leverage the tools. And I think getting a lot of the hype always comes, well, yeah, but you can create a business plan. And a friend of mine said, so I asked ChatGPT or Copilot, create a business plan, and it precisely what you said, the data, the context wasn't there. So it produced some fancy graphics and maybe some bar charts, but it was completely irrelevant. So it's like, bad data in, bad data out. But this comes back down to even transformations when I've done, data compliance transformations and moving from things like, home drives over to SharePoint. If you've got data in a bad place, if you don't sort it out, it's going to be bad. And you start asking questions about data, you're going to get bad answers. So, and some of this is really fundamental. It's almost obvious, but everyone's almost like sleepwalking into exactly the same thing all the time. So, so you're not going to fix everything, but somehow making small changes and getting some of these messages out. And yes, you can't sit and transform your data for the next 5 years, but how can we take niche specific use cases and then start to look at adopting them, whether be that with cloud, with AI, with whatever's coming next, it'll be exactly the same thing.
Exactly. There's always a next. Yeah. History has shown us. So
yes.
Fantastic. Well, appreciate you being on the call. And the best way for people to get in touch with you is through LinkedIn, presumably.
Not LinkedIn. Yeah, in the process of getting all that updated and so on. But yeah, LinkedIn for certain. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I recommend to people checking you out. Thanks so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And as a reminder to everyone, this show is sponsored by the Consulting Launch Method, where I help experienced tech professionals build their own consulting business without spending years figuring out the business side. We've helped clients go from first idea to first clients in 90 days and 6 figures within a year. To learn more, connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message. Until the next episode, Andy, thank you.
Thanks very much.